Some of Jesus' last words on earth were, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" To be forsaken is to have others give up on you or withdraw their monetary or emotional support. It can also mean to be left behind, abandoned, or deserted. To feel forsaken is to believe you have been forgotten. Jesus was forsaken in both of these ways. As a result, he's acutely aware of complete isolation and outward hostility following prolonged periods of popularity. Jesus knew what it was like to ride waves of support. For all of the negative publicity and ridicule directed upon him from the outset of his ministry, there was an accompanying surge of public interest in his message and activities. From Matthew, we're informed, and his fame went throughout all Syria, and there followed him great multitudes of people from Galilee, and from Decapolis, and from Jerusalem, and from Judea, and from beyond Jordan. Even when he would come out from his places of refuge, swarms of people would be ready to engulf him, as evidenced by this description in Matthew. When he was come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. These multitudes were comprised of disciples, the curious, and those who sought to do him harm. Like modern-day celebrities, Jesus had to try to solve the logistical challenges of dealing with paparazzi and seeking places apart from the people to address more important matters. For instance, a Joseph Smith translation of Mark 7:24 describes Jesus entering into a house and would that no man should come unto him, but he could not deny them, for he had compassion upon all men. As happens with famous people today, Jesus had some superfans, violent fanatics who sought to take him by force and make him a king. This he discerningly avoided, and importantly, Jesus' focus on his Father's will prevented him from developing the swelling ego that so easily accompanies general notoriety. Jesus was both obscure and famous. He offers succor to the lowliest of men and women. At the same time, he offers it to those engulfed in popularity. Despite all of Jesus' success, not all of his followers were true believers, and Jesus knew from the beginning who they were that believed not. For instance, Jesus knew that a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased, and because they did eat of the loaves and were filled. Jesus also knew of much murmuring among the people concerning him. For some said, "He's a good man," and others said, "Nay, but he deceiveth the people." At times, Jesus' support was divided along theological lines. Shall Christ come out of Galilee? Some people asked, while others argued aloud, "When Christ cometh, will he do more miracles than these which this man hath done?" Jesus also knew that some of the believing souls among his followers were not producing exculpatory belief, for no man spake openly of him for fear of the Jews. Yet, in his long suffering, Jesus persuaded them to keep his sayings and believe on him as the true bread from heaven, the bread of life. As always is the case, however, some people will simply prefer an immediate mess of pottage to satisfy their lusts over an alternative that requires changing one's mind. In response to his strict requirements, some disciples chose to walk away. This is a hard saying. At least some of them were heard to exclaim, "Who can hear it?" And from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. As you can see, Jesus knows what it means to be renounced and see his followers dwindle in number. What does public withdrawal of support do to a person? And how did it affect Jesus? There might be a tendency to think Jesus was merely discouraged or even indifferent to such losses, that he saw it as merely coming with the territory. However, the fully consecrated know that they have sacrificed everything for the work, including thoughts of inevitability and failure. They are all in, as it were, and leave everything on the field. It's the joy and excitement that comes from working for a potential yield that motivates their continual investment of energy and resources. Consider the parable of the olive tree in Jacob 5. There, the Lord of the vineyard, working with his servant, dungs, digs about, and nourishes trees throughout the vineyard. Together, they labor and rejoice in trees that produce tame fruit. At the same time, they lament other trees in the same spots of ground, trees that have received the same degree of attention, yet which have produced wild fruit. After a long time nourishing the vineyard, and notwithstanding all of their labor, and notwithstanding all the care which they have taken, It grieves them that they should lose their tree. In despair, the Lord of the vineyard exclaims, "What could have I done more? Have I slackened my hand that I have not nourished it? Nay, I have nourished it, and I've digged about it, and I've pruned it, and I've dunged it, and I've stretched forth my hand almost all of the day, and the end draweth nigh." This is what it was like for Jesus to be forsaken by his followers. The experience produced a deep feeling of loss. For each piece of fruit on every tree who turned away, Jesus was devastated. He had given all to nourish and provide for them. And in his own words, he says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not." Jesus also experienced forsakenness in terms of utter abandonment. Throughout his life, Jesus could always rely on his Heavenly Father to comfort, for guidance, and sustain support. And this was true amidst any setback, challenge, or tragedy. Jesus was, in fact, left completely alone for a time by his Father. There was no warning or explanation. Jesus called, and there was none to answer. President Brigham Young explained it as Jesus needing to experience darkness in proportion to the light which had been given him. Jesus had been with his Father, talked with him, dwelt in his bosom, and knew all about heaven, about making the earth, about the transgression of man, and what would redeem the people, and that he was the character who was to redeem the sons of earth and the earth itself from all sin that had come upon it. The light, knowledge, power, and glory with which he was clothed were far above or exceeded that of all others who had been upon this earth after the fall. Consequently, at the very moment, at the very hour when the crisis came for him to offer up his life, the Father withdrew himself, withdrew his Spirit, and cast a veil over him. And that is what made him sweat blood. If he had had the power of God upon him, he would not have sweat blood. But all was withdrawn from him, and a veil was cast over him. And he then pled with the Father not to forsake him. However unimaginable and unprecedented the experience was to Jesus, he appears to have responded reflexively, saying, "Nevertheless, glory be to the Father. I partook and finished my preparations unto the children of men." Jesus' response in his darkest hour teaches us how to respond in our moments of darkness. Trust in God. Remember that you have proved him in days that are past. And finally, use those memories to press forward.